That's enough relational time. Relationships are overrated. Let's get back to the program. Actually, what I want to do, we're going to just put a video up here on the screen as you're still getting back to your seats. Let's go ahead and run the video, and then I'll share a little bit about what it is. Have any of you been to Reverberate before? Joined us out at Longs Park. So every year for the last several years, Water Street has hosted just a night of worship and celebration. Our whole intent is to make it a night where the body of Christ can gather together across denominations, across locations. There's so many people who are a part of the body of Christ they're our brothers and sisters. We're all on this journey together, but we don't see each other. We don't worship together. And so Reverberate's just a chance to do that and to celebrate what God is doing in Lancaster County. So really there's very little agenda for the night other than to sing and worship God together and to hear stories about how God is moving in and through people in Lancaster County. It's a great time. A few thousand people gathered on the hillside in Longs Park worshiping God together. We'd love if you would join us September 20th. September 20th, 26th. So after the summer concert series is over at Longs Park, we take over. And it's wonderful. There's food trucks. There's just great time of fellowship. People come early, eat on the hillside, meet people from all different churches around the county, and then we worship together and hear great stories of what God's doing. So love to have you join us. My staff forces me to do little Water Street plugs during this because I don't like doing them because this event's not about Water Street. So I have one more plug to do for Water Street. Then I'm going to get some plugs in for CAP and Factory. So those pictures that you see around the edge of the room on that side, that was part of a display that was created for our 120th anniversary last year for our evening of celebration. We had an amazing photographer, Adam Pape from... He works for New Yorker Magazine, New York Times, a number of other really wonderful publications. Really talented photographer. He had been down to visit us with Matthew Desmond, who's an author, to spend time with our guests at Water Street and learn about who we are, how we do the work that we do. Adam, when we reached back out to him, said, "Hey, would you be willing to come back and maybe help capture a little bit of who we are?" He was so happy and generous to do it. And so he came and spent an entire week hanging out at Water Street, capturing the heart of our ministry in these pictures. And we created a display called 120 Ways to Share the Gospel for 120 years of ministry. And just tries to capture like all the little ways that we share the gospel. We share the love of Jesus and invite people to understand who he is just by loving them. And so that's what those pictures are. First Friday in April, which happens to be Good Friday. You may be having things going on at your church, but if you don't, you could come to the Ware Center on South Prince Street. There's going to be a display of everyday ways to share the gospel. Not the full 120, but a small, probably about 2/3 of the display will be in there. So we're changing the name to Everyday Ways to Share the Gospel. Maybe a way to inspire you or you and your friends. Come out for First Friday, get a nice meal. Visit that. There's also a really cool display by our friends at the Homeless Advocacy Board that's going to be in one of the adjoining galleries. So it's just going to be some really neat synergy between those two displays at the same time on a First Friday in April. So we'd love for you to join us for that too. And now a quick plug for Factory and for CAP is as we're thinking about poverty, as we're thinking about how do we help our congregations grow and learn more in their understanding of poverty. Each of those organizations offer ways to engage with people. So Vanessa and I were talking, they do a poverty simulation that CAP hosts. We've actually had our staff go through it. It's been super valuable. And that's something that they can offer for churches as well. And so if you're ever interested in having your leadership team or small groups or whatever go through a poverty simulation, connect with Vanessa. It would be a great opportunity to help kind of open people's eyes to the realities around them. And then Adam already referenced earlier, he's a trainer for a system called Bridges Out of Poverty. And fantastic. I've been through that training. Actually, our staff have been through that as well, a lot of them. Really valuable in helping us understand. For me, like the biggest eye-opening part was the hidden languages of class, of socioeconomic class, and super revealing, having grown up in a kind of upper middle class family, going to a school that was kind of surrounded by a lot of wealth, and then moving into a neighborhood that's the lowest income census tract in our county. Like I'd lived in all those worlds, but I couldn't put it together until some of the things that I learned through Bridges Out of Poverty. So again, Adam is willing to do, and there's different sizes of training. You can do a 2-hour, I think, is the smallest, but up to a full day training, or even multi-day, right? Yeah, so reach out to Adam if you'd like to learn more about Bridges Out of Poverty. So there, I satisfied myself. If I have to plug Water Street, I need to plug somebody else too. So sorry, guys. We're going to move on to our next piece of our exploration today. And so I think I'm going to have our panelists come up first, and we'll save the exercise for after when we do our breakout. So if Rick and Lily and Steve can come back up. We're going to talk a little bit about relationship-driven responses. Let's hear it for our panelists. Woo. So, before we get into the response side of it, we've talked a lot about, we've hinted at this at different times, but for the most part, as we've been talking about poverty today, it still has been tied to this lack of sufficient resources. It's lacking in some area that's necessary for us to thrive. Could you speak to the role that relationships or lack of relationship intersects with material poverty? How have you seen that play out in your own experiences, in the organizations you've worked with? How does relationship and that material poverty intersect together? They're all
you gave us this earlier, didn't you, Jack?
I did. This one I did send to you. Like yesterday, but 2 days
last
ago.
Night.
No, it was 2 nights ago, Rick. Come on. Go ahead, Lily.
Okay. So I was curious what we have learned at Water Street about this, which is a lot, but there are a couple things that I was focusing on. One was pulling some data on the top 5 reasons that people are seeking shelter at Water Street. And fascinatingly, also unsurprisingly, the top 4, eviction, job loss, insufficient income, and family disruption, are all tied together. So I was thinking about how, if you don't have enough income, you lose your job, you get evicted. But here's the critical piece. You get evicted and there's no safety net. There are no relationships to fall back on. So if we did a thought exercise, if you thought right now in your brains that if you go home today and there's a really ugly email in your inbox that says you've lost your job, and then there's another email that says your house is being foreclosed on, who do you go to? And most of us in this room can pull up at least 2 or 3 other names of people that we could go to. Our folks who are experiencing this type of resource deprivation are also experiencing relational deprivation. There's no one they can draw on when they're in a crisis like this. So for us, I was just thinking it's really critical to pay attention to talking about under-resourced, as Adam was talking about, folks who are under-resourced relationally. They don't have the strong connections. They don't have strong bonds. If you also just look at public health data and literature, it shows us that folks with relational networks or relational supports, that's a very strong protective factor for them, for their mental health, for their physical health, and in a time of crisis or in a traumatic event. So people who have a strong network, even if they're going through something really awful, they're going to be okay. And on the flip side of that, folks who have no support networks, no relationships, no good connections, if they experience a crisis or a major life event, they're not going to be okay. Like, that's one of the strongest predictors or contributors to chronic disease, mental health crisis, relapse, experiencing homelessness. So relationships are more than just nice to have. They're actually designed by God to be protection when we experience life in all of its hardship and in all of its pain. I think that's something that when we encounter folks at Water Street coming in with these relational deficits, that we're conscious not just that they're vulnerable, but they're missing something that God created, that he wanted for them, that he still wants for them. But there have been a series of actions and reactions and choices and lack of choices that led them to a point where they don't have it anymore. They don't have these relationships, or they don't have access to them anymore. And that should change the way that we engage with folks. And it does change the way we engage with folks to come from a place of empathy and from a place of, wow, this isn't just you don't have money. This is you're missing something that God created for you and wants for you. And is there a way that we can wrap around you in your moment of crisis and then help you start recognizing where you want to rebuild those connections?
Yeah, I think material poverty, too, it's depleting. If you've been impoverished for an extended period of time, maybe, not having the resources that Lily's talking about, it's depleting physically, it's depleting mentally, it's depleting emotionally, spiritually, socially, etc. And, it lends itself to relational poverty. And, if I had an issue that came at me unexpectedly, I do have a network that Lily was talking about. I could fall back on financial resources. I know Jack, who has a large savings account. I can talk to him. He might take me into his home bedroom for a minute.
I don't have a savings account, but I have an empty bedroom.
That's right. You have girls in college still.
Yeah.
Okay. So, relational poverty, it's a relational strength. It's a network. And it's not that impoverished folks don't have a network, but if the network is depleted also, I can go someplace and find more resource. Some of our friends can't do that.
Mm-hmm. So I would go back to something Jack was sharing earlier about the three things that the way the kids answered about their future, and one of them was that some of them didn't have a dream. And I've been thinking about that for the last couple of days, about how part of our response for being relationally driven is to help people find their dream. So when I was in New Hampshire, there was an 18-year-old kid who walked through our door. His name was Kyle. And Kyle walked through our door. Kyle had just aged out of foster care the day before and had nowhere to go. Foster parents kicked him to the curb. He didn't have a job, didn't have a high school diploma, didn't have any family, didn't have any friends, and he walked through the door of the rescue mission. And we were able, over the next 2 years, to help Kyle get his GED, help him to, accumulate all those material things. But the greatest thing that we were able to do was introduce him to a community at Crossway Christian Church in Nashua, New Hampshire. And they walked with him through Jobs for Life and a couple other program things. But in the midst of that, the men from the church embraced Kyle, created relationship. He now had a safety net, so that when his time was up at the mission, and we did, now, I did things a little bit different than they do at Water Street. I had no end dates, as long as people had a plan. So Kyle was with us for 2 years, so that when he left, Kyle had enough money in the bank that if he lost his job, he would be able to support himself for 6 months. And that was my promise. If you stay with us, I'll let you stay till you accumulate enough in your savings account that you can pay 6 months rent. 6 months rent. You won't have to worry about your bills for 6 months when you leave here. And we did. But it wasn't just that relationship. It was the relationships of the men at Crossway Christian Church that enabled Kyle to be successful. So that when Kyle eventually at some point down the road decided to leave his job at Chick-fil-A, and while he was going to Nashua Community College and pursuing a graphic arts degree, decided to leave his job, these men stayed with him, walked with him, helped him manage his finances until he was able to get another job. And now I've been back in Lancaster for 7 years, so 9 years later, Kyle is still in relationship with these men, and I get regular updates from New Hampshire about how Kyle's doing.
I think that's a critical piece too. What you mentioned, Rick. When we have seen folks move into sobriety out of long-term addiction or long-term homelessness or generational poverty, I can't think of an instance where it's not done without relationship with others. So healing happens in relationship also.
Yeah. It's not always natural. It's not always something that people can see for themselves or even desire. We joked about being introverts, right? But how hard that can be for somebody who's experienced trauma after trauma and the trauma of homelessness or addiction, and then coming out on the other side and recognizing the need, the value of relationship, of community, but also knowing that may not be natural for them. Like we joke about our ability to connect and give. I remember hearing from one of our guests who's kind of been with us several times through the years, and I've been friends with him for years and years and years. And on his last visit with us, he is out on his own again and doing well, as best I can tell. But his last time he came in, we were kind of walking through what led to this again, and it was the same old story of isolation, and then bumps in the road, and then having nobody to turn to or being ashamed to turn to somebody because you hadn't been staying connected to them. And you knew they'd be there for you, but you don't want to go to them because you haven't been there. And he said to me, I've come to realize I love isolation. I know it's the most dangerous thing for me, but I love it. I love just having being able to close the door and be alone. And that tension, he knows how bad it is for him, and he knows, and he loves, there are people in his life that he loves the relationship he has with them, but there's this part of him that's still wired in a way that no, I just want to close the door and be alone, but how toxic that can be. It was fascinating to hear him admit that was huge.
Yeah, Jack, one of the things I think we forget too, I told Jack and Adam a story from my past. I was going to a poverty conference, learning about poverty, a poverty conference. I had to learn about it in Jackson, Mississippi. So I blow in, I'm on a social worker's salary, making the fat change. And so there's a McDonald's across the street. I had a huge account to spend on food. As I'm walking across the street, though, I made a mistake. I caught the eye of a homeless guy. I'm like, oh my gosh. I caught this guy's eyesight. Oh no. I know he's going to ask me for money. Sure enough, he asked me for money. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I got to get to this poverty conference. I got to get to McDonald's so I can go back to the poverty conference. And now you're in my way. And I'm inside, I'm just like this. And so I'm like, all right, come on to McDonald's. And of course, he has to order the most expensive thing on the menu. It blows my whole account for that conference. And he's eating and I'm eating and we're not really talking too much. And inside I'm sitting here like this, just, kind of, I gotta get back to this poverty conference. I'm just really upset. Halfway through, he dug into his backpack. He pulled out a discolored piece of construction paper, I think, and a little stubby pencil. I don't know what he was doing. He's just under the table doing something. And after we had finished up, I guess I talked to him a little bit. I didn't tell him how angry I was, but he pulls out this piece of paper and gives it to me. he had drawn a picture of my face with his little stubby pencil. Joe Coxwell, I forget the date, Jackson, Mississippi. And I was like, all of a sudden, I was very convicted. The Holy Spirit is real, okay? I was convinced, convicted, hit over the side of the head, whatever. But it reminded me how prideful I am, but also, you know, those caught in poverty, those caught in addiction, those caught in homelessness, they bring something to the table too, even if it's well hidden. And part of our task in relationship, as someone moves out of material poverty, is try to find what this person made in God's image, this image bearer, is bringing to the table, and then bringing that out and walking with that too.
Yeah. That's leading right into the next question that I have for you guys. Because you read the questions ahead of time?
You could use bigger print for an older guy, but...
It's just this gray fuzz on the paper. I have to use my readers too. What are the biggest challenges? So obviously relationship is so important for all of us. But what's the biggest challenges to healthy relational connection across economic classes? Because that's the reality. Most of us in this room are not one paycheck away from homelessness. As much as that cliche rings true to some degree, we know, as Lily said, like, if that happened, I know 3, 4, 5 people I could call. I'm not one paycheck away. But so relationships, critical. What are the biggest barriers when we think about how are we going to come alongside in meaningful ways, not a us, them, not a paternalistic or, genuine relationship?
I think Steve just touched on one of the biggest ones for me, and that is recognizing everybody has something to give. Everybody brings something to the table. So I was at Water Street. It was probably 2001, and I was doing check-in on a September night in the dining hall. I was the evening duty chaplain, and so I was checking people from the community in for the meal, and this woman came in. She's about, at that point, I guess she was in her 70s, and she came in with her 50-year-old son, and she walks over, and she had heard that I hadn't been in the week before because my daughter Jelena had been born. And she walked in, and Anna Mae handed me a dress and a card with $5 in it. Now, I know Anna Mae is on Social Security, and her son's on disability, and they barely make it. But she came in, and she handed this to me, and she said, congratulations. Everybody's got something to give. The question is, are we in a posture to receive it?
Tagging onto that, I was thinking that it takes us being willing to do our own work. So if we're not willing, we being the people in this room and the people who want to share God's love with others, if we're not willing to first understand and acknowledge who we are and what we bring to the table and what we don't bring to the table and why we are the way we are, what are we telling other people then? And it goes back to the question of authenticity in all relationships, that if I show up in a space with somebody who's experiencing a different financial situation from me, but I'm actually just seeing them as a brother or a sister, somebody who's just wants to love, wants to give, wants to share something that they have, that's a very different experience than coming into the room saying, I know what I'm talking about, and if you would just sit down and listen, maybe you would learn from me, right? Same situation, but two different postures. So I think it takes us being willing to humble ourselves and ask the Lord to do the hard work in us. And I actually mean it's really hard work. Like sometimes we say hard work and we're like, yeah, but maybe if I just live long enough, I'll like intuit these things or God will refine them out of me. And maybe he does, but I actually mean hard work in the sense of it takes good friends to talk to you about things. It takes a lot of accountability. It takes therapy. It takes counseling. It takes community. It takes hard work to see who you are before you can navigate in with others, or as you navigate in with others, because you never quite finish before you're interacting with other people around you. So I think when I was working in Philly as one of my first jobs, we did a church training program about how to train lay leaders just to engage with the people who are walking in their doors all the time. That's all we were doing. It's just like, hey, when people come in your front office, your church office, and ask for, $300 for rent, like, how do you actually engage them at that time? So we would do these trainings. They were like a 6-hour training, and 75% of the training was grappling with you. The pastors did not like that. That was like a really hard sell, right? The last 25% of the training was, here's the resources, here's some things you can start thinking about, here's ways you could get people connected. And I remember one pastor coming up to me later and saying, do I have to stay through the whole thing? And I was like, well, that would be ideal, but I guess you don't have to. And he said, just give me the resources so I know where to send people. I'm guilty, right? I'm not even pointing fingers. I'm saying, how many times have I in my own practice said, just show me where to send people. And sending is automatically a distancing. Sending is a moving away from. Instead of come closer, let's be side by side. Let's learn what it means to love Jesus together. And can I share with you some of the trial and error and the mistakes I've made and the things that I'm growing in? Can I be that authentic to see you as a human being who's worthy of hearing about my journey, just as I'm asking you to be authentic about yours?
Each of you have kind of answered this along the way, but I want to give another explicit opportunity to share what you've learned. All of you, again, have been at this for a while, and you've walked in relationship with people at all different levels. What have you learned from those that maybe you came into it, I'm here to serve, right? But what have you learned from those individuals about the power of relationship, about the right way to do this kind of ministry and work and loving our neighbors?
It's really easy, right?
I've learned a lot about resilience, coming alongside different folks through the years. I started out at the starting line, not wealthy necessarily, maybe middle class, I don't know. But we work with people who are 30 yards behind the starting line. And when I can see hope and a vision, a way forward through their eyes, I'm just humbled. Because I'm thinking, man, if I was in that situation, I don't know if I could look forward at all. I'd be looking inward and downward the whole time. But the resilience in the folks we're allowed to walk with is, it's from God. It's an amazing thing. And I want to come alongside that.
So programs provide the framework under which relationships in ministry can thrive. And I say that because I've been in 3 different rescue missions, plus pastor in a church. And in each one of those settings, we've had a framework for how we did things. And yet, within each one of those, also had individuals that I walked with in each one of those settings. And I'm just thinking back, and 2 weeks ago, somebody that I walked with 15 years ago in Wilkes-Barre happened to be in town, sent me a Facebook message and said, can we get together? 2 weeks before that, I got a call from a guy in Allentown who used to be at Water Street 30 years ago to say, hey, this is what's going on. This is how I'm doing. I'm still alive, right? And that's an important thing for him to include in there, right? Because the truth is, even though we have these wonderful programs that help people succeed, our definition of success and theirs may not always be the same. So do we give them permission to fail and walk with them anyway? Because how many of us have needed permission to fail at least once? Right? Do we give them permission to fail and continue to walk with them? And this guy from 30 years ago, his road has been up and down and all over the place. He's been in and out of Crossroads 3 or 4 times since I've been back. But the reality is he knows I will always be there, no matter what. And so, yeah, the programs are wonderful, but relationships have taught me that piece, that the programs are just the framework under which the relationships have a chance to thrive.
I think the other thing too that I've learned is we need to point to Jesus, who's the one that will restore, and in everything we do, programs, relationships,
We're talking
etc.
to pastors, it's assumed.
They don't know that.
Oh.
I was thinking too about the power of joy and the power of celebration. Those of us who have ever been through any kind of crisis know that like joy is the first thing to go. You're just kind of in survival mode and you're not thinking about like what's really positive today or what am I really encouraged about or really thankful about right now. And if you are, that's amazing. Thank you. You're a very special person. But the power of holding space for joy and for encouragement and for celebration is enormous. And I just don't think we can overstate how important that is for someone who is hurting and someone who needs to hear that. I had the privilege of walking alongside one of our female residential guests a couple years ago, and she was working through something really tough. And we were kind of like back and forth on this, month after month after month, and she just wasn't able to make progress on this one goal that she had identified. And then one day she came in and she said, I did the first step. Like she did one, there were like 10 steps. She did one thing. And I just like burst into happy tears. I'm a crier. I cry all the time. I like start crying. I'm like, I am so proud of you. And she stopped like frozen. And I thought, oh no, I stepped on a landmine. Like I must have said something that was really hurtful or really, And she starts to cry and she said, no one has ever said they were proud of me before. How simple is that to say, I'm so proud of you, right? Or we will be together in this. We're not giving false assurances. We're not saying it's all going to be okay. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. But I'm just saying I'm going to be with you in this, even if you fail. And even if it takes you 12 months to do one thing, like I will be with it in you. And I'm so proud of you. And I hope you're so proud of yourself too.
Well, I want to add to what you're saying there, because if you are not walking in a trusting relationship and you said, I'm so proud of you, that would have felt totally different, right? That would have felt very condescending. There's an adult woman who took one step forward. Oh, I'm so proud of you. Even if your tone was genuine, if the relationship wasn't there, but it's the relationship that you had, how she saw you, how she trusted you. When you said that, it was powerful. And I think that has to be included in that. It's not just like, people need to know that they're doing good and celebrate it. That's important. But when it's coming out of relationship, it's transforming. So,
Jack, do you have time for one last story?
Yes.
Okay, real
If
quick.
you keep it
Is
quick.
Maria watching? And
You let Steve and I on the stage at the same time.
Maria,
you should have overruled
thank
that
you, Maria.
from the very beginning.
One last thing. The other thing I think I've learned too is never believe that anyone is beyond the reach of Christ.
Yeah.
I was privileged to walk with a gal in Philadelphia for a time, Emily, and I was actually working with her via Zoom, with a homeless person via Zoom. But and one day she wanted to come to visit me at the rescue mission, and it was a terrible day, January, cold rain, and I didn't understand that she was in a wheelchair. I had only seen her face on the Zoom call. Is that what it's called, Zoom call? And so I couldn't get a hold of her. I didn't have her phone number. She came to the rescue mission that day, though. She had to go from her home in North Philly on a mechanical wheelchair, not an electric, to get to the bus, to take it to the L, to get down to Center City, and then walk from right around the market there, down to 13th and Vine. And it's raining. I opened the bell rang, and here she is in a wheelchair. And I was like, I didn't even know she was in a wheelchair. That's how astute I am. I was able to develop such a good relationship. I didn't know what her situation was. And I bring her in, and I try to start drying her off a little bit. And then there's another thing I didn't know about her. I looked down at her feet. There weren't any feet. They had been amputated. She had been in Kensington for a bit and had slept out overnight 2 nights in a row prostituting herself, and then had gotten high and stayed out in the cold. And I was just stunned, and I didn't know that either. So our relationship was just deepening at that point in time. But you know what she said to me? She said, "Mr. Steve, I'm so glad to be here. Can I come to the mission every day and hang out at lunchtime and talk to the residents here about Jesus?" I don't know if I answered her because I started tearing up like Lily did. And never forget, no one's beyond the reach of Christ.
Amen. Thank you, Steve. Let's hear for the panelists. Thank you. As we transition, another aspect, because a lot of the stories here, and I'm so glad they are, because the experiences Lily, Rick, and Steve have are so powerful, walking with our friends who are at the most extreme. But as you leave here today, there's a few of you who are going to be walking in relationship with those experiencing homelessness, but more likely you're going to be walking with people who are struggling in other ways, as we identified earlier. Some of those Alice families, some people who are somewhere in that range near poverty, but they're struggling in different ways, and that may look a little different. And it starts with awareness and intentionality of how are we building relationships? How are we opening ourselves to that call that Jesus has to love our neighbors? And so thinking beyond maybe the extremes to like what's in our own community. We've already looked at data that this is in your neighborhood. People experiencing poverty, people struggling, people who are on the edge and hurting for resources, but hurting for relationship are all around you. What are you doing intentionally outside the doors of your church? Not just the programs you're running, but outside the doors. What are you doing to build those relationships? And so I'm going to invite you to do a really risky exercise right now. On your table, I want you to grab the yellow card. Some of you know what this is, and you're already angry at me. Some of you know what this is, and you're like, yes, I did it, and I'm going to be able to fill this out. And I hear laughter, and I'm not sure if it's happy laughter or you're mad at me. So this comes from the book called The Art of Neighboring. We introduced it the first year we did Compelled. We brought back Dave Runyon, the author, the second year to do a whole day on the art of neighboring. And the very simple concept of it is Jesus said there were 2 great commands, right? The greatest command is to love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and to love your neighbor as yourself. What if we believed him? What if we actually took it seriously and we said, let's love our neighbors? And then Dave said, that's too easy, because then we're like, oh, well, like that's this theoretical thing. It's like, well, my neighbor is everybody, right? The Good Samaritan, I read that and I'm like, oh yeah, it means that everybody's my neighbor. So I'm going to love everybody. That's too easy. How about the person who lives next door to you? That just moved in 3 years ago and you were like, ugh, really? Or you moved in and you were really excited and they said, So what we're going to do is take this card, very similar to what we did before. Who is my neighbor? That square in the middle is your house. The 8 squares around it are the physically closest houses to you, or apartments to you, or whatever housing units you live in. You're not allowed to skip over and say, yeah, oh man, I know Joe. He's a block and a half away. Maybe he's like number 9. I'm going to skip number 8. But the 8 closest houses to you. Very simple. Put in the name of the person who lives there. Do you know the names of the people who live in the 8 houses closest to your physical property? Can you list the children if there are any? And then do you know anything about them other than their name? Their occupation, something going on in their life or family, their favorite football team, the fact that they hate football. What do you know about them? We're going to take a few minutes to do that. And you cannot put in, that that really old guy who mows his lawn without a shirt on and scares all the neighbor kids on Saturday. That's not a name. His name's Jack, did you say? The good thing is I only have this much yard, so it's done in 5 minutes. So yeah, let's take a few minutes and see how you do. 8 houses, closest proximity to you.
What if it's
All right. Just a quick survey of the room, how we did. How many of you were able to fill all 8 boxes with the name of a person who actually lives there, not a description of them? Let me see. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11. It was about 11 of you. That is fantastic. There's way more than 11 people here, though, right? Dave Runyon, who wrote the book and has done these presentations all across the country with groups of pastors, with churches, with whatever, he said he's never been in a room where 50% were able to raise their hand. And he's done it hundreds of times. Never been in a room where 50% or more of the room could raise their hand. So we're in good company. But 11 of you, how many of you were able to do like 5 or 6? We see more? Okay, awesome. That's fantastic. So here's your assignment. Maria loves when I give practical takeaways. By the way, Maria Schasberger, she stepped out of the room so we can talk about her. Maria is amazing. She is the brainchild behind Compelled, and she is our church ambassador at Water Street. So she's probably been in touch with a lot of you personally. She loves to help build those relationships between the churches in our community and Water Street. But a number of years ago, through those conversations that I described earlier, she and I sat down together, and she really had a heart. She's like, how do we get churches together to really wrestle with this? How do we love our neighbors better? And so I'm so grateful for Maria. Oh, she's back in the room. We got to stop talking about her. Let's hear it for Maria Schasberg. Now she's even more mad at me. So your assignment, your practical takeaway, did you hear that, Maria? Practical takeaway is take this card home. If you don't have all 8 of these filled out, see if you can fill it out over the next 2 months. Give you a little bit of time because we're busy people. What would it take for you to learn the names of some of your neighbors? Maybe it's spending just a little bit more time lingering outside instead of pulling into the garage and going right into your house and only going out when it's time to mow the lawn, which is coming soon. Maybe it's that awkward walk across the street to knock on a door and say, hey, man, I see you all the time. And I think like 3 years ago, we actually introduced ourselves. And I totally can't remember your name. But we live right here. I'd love to know. I'm Jack. What's your name? So, moment of truth. I was going to do a presentation to a group of people at our Teen Haven Center and about this. And on my way home, after having everybody fill out their cards and talk about how hard this is and blah, 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 I'm walking home, and there on the sidewalk, or sitting on his porch as I'm walking up the sidewalk, is one of my neighbors. And I'm 2 houses away, and he's like, hey, Jack, how's it going? Hey, buddy. Hey, neighbor. This is good. Like, I had no idea what to say. I was like, hey, what's up? Didn't even venture a guess at his name. I had no idea what his name was. We've lived 3 houses away from each other for, at that point, probably 10 years. We'd had conversations because he was a friendly guy and I'm a friendly guy. I never could remember his name. I get to my porch, I'm walking up the steps. I'd just done a training on who's my neighbor. I turned around and I walked back. And I said, this is going to be really awkward. I said that to myself in my head, and then I walked up to him and I said, this is going to be really awkward. I said, you've been calling me Jack for years, I cannot remember your name. I'm so sorry. He's like, I'm Richie. No shame, no shame on me. He's like, I'm Richie. It's great to meet you. I'll never forget Richie's name. That awkward moment, which felt so painful to me until the moment he shook my hand and started laughing at the fact that I couldn't remember his name after all these years. And I know all about Richie and his life now. We've gotten to know each other much, much deeper ways. And it's been amazing. And I can fill out my card now, but it's taken me a while. My wife can fill out 3 of those cards. She's ridiculous. And she's an introvert, but she's observant, and she's got a great memory, and she cares about people. So that's your challenge. Next 2 months, see if you can fill out this card. See if you can find some relevant information, because it's hard to love our neighbors if we don't know who they are. Plain and simple. How do you say you love somebody that you see all the time and you don't even know their name and you know nothing about them? But that's the reality we live in. Our relationships are segmented to other places in our life, and we've only got so much bandwidth. I'm in that place. I have told my daughters, I will try to remember a few of your friends' names. Because they all moved on from high school to college, and it's a whole new set of friends. I can't keep up at all. I was exhausted with all their high school friends and their parents and all them, plus all the people I work with and all the other, I've got a limited capacity. But I'm I'll remember your roommates' names, maybe, because the one was living with 6 girls. But it's part of caring and loving is knowing. It starts with knowing. So that's the first thing. We're going to have another brief conversation around the table. If I can get it to change. Maybe I need some help. There we go, discussion questions. So, to this point, many of you have been a part of Compelled before. Many of you are doing this naturally because you're wired for it. But here's a chance to learn from one another, to share with one another. What ways are you currently equipping your congregation to love their neighbors? Is there intentionality in your church around this? This is the greatest command, right? To love God, love your neighbors. What are you doing? I'd love to hear. And I think the people around the table would love to hear. What is your church doing to equip and inspire your congregation to love their neighbors? Have you ever used the art of neighboring? Some of you were here the year that we did the Bless book. Begin with prayer. Listen. I'm going to get it all wrong. Eat. How can I miss eat? Serve and share. So bless. Some of you know that. Maybe you're already using it. Share what that means, how you use that in your church to equip others. And then bonus question if you have time, but let's focus on those 2. If you have time or you don't have answers to the first one, if you were to try to make one of your programs that you're doing in your church more relational in its approach, it's a good program. You don't want to abandon it. You want to feed into this, but to make it more relational, what would you do? Which program would you adapt, and what steps would you take to make it more relational? We're going to take about 10 minutes around the table to explore these questions, share some of the ways that you are helping your congregation grow in their ability to love their neighbor. All right, 10, 7, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, we're gonna go to break in just a few minutes, and you'll be able to continue these conversations during the break over some fresh, warm, freshly baked cookies. Man, they are good, and there's a variety of flavors. But you have to be good for the next few minutes, or I'm going to keep talking, and they'll get cold, and they won't be as good. But actually, I'd love to hear a little bit of what was said around the table. Who's doing something really unique to help equip and inspire their congregation to love their neighbors? Somebody in the back is being pointed out by others.
About a block and a half from my home, I live in Anderson, and there's a couple called Ferdinand. It's
Mm.
And my plan is, my hope is to do something on a monthly basis. And eventually, I am a chaplain, and as they know me, they'll feel free to follow up on
Awesome.
this. But I know they need to know me
Yeah.
and feel loved.
Yep.
And I'm privileged. My journey has qualified me to live, and sometimes for Water Street and
Yeah.
very fit and
Thanks for sharing that. That's wonderful. Any other examples of how you're helping your congregation grow in their ability to love their neighbors? Matt.
The one was in the church body, we make our people uncomfortable to pray for one another and go deeper so that they can give to be able to do it when they're outside. And the other one was every week in the bulletin they put a conversation phrase that sometimes they do it right there, sometimes it's a challenge. Learning to ask simple questions out of sphere of influence generate deep conversation.
There's an acknowledgement in that, Matt. I'm hearing from you that we do struggle sometimes to know how to engage outside, and practicing it within the walls of the church, practicing it in what's already a safe space for some of us, especially if maybe our doors aren't going to be the most wide open welcoming because of maybe our location. And for proximity for people to get there, it may be difficult. So it really is about equipping people to go out. But are we modeling it inside? How do you have those meaningful conversation building with somebody you know but you don't know, but like, hey, we're all safe here. Being able to practice with one another, meaningful conversation, relationship building trust. That's great.
We have two main parts of our vision as a church, and the second one is to be externally focused, reach out. And the pastors share that every single Sunday as part of their announcements and what our heart is. And so one of the things that we do is try to, I coordinate the outreach, so I'm trying to find people on a regular basis to be interviewed for something that they've done, whether it's happened, a testimonial,
Yeah.
how they've reached a neighbor, or shared the gospel, prayed for somebody. So we're trying to let the church see
Yeah.
examples of what's happening with being out.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah, what you measure, you get. What you celebrate, you reinforce, right? So if you're telling people, but are you celebrating when it's happening? Having them share testimonies of things that they've done and how it's gone. That's awesome. Okay. Wow. All right. Man, how to become the most popular neighbor on the block?
well, they always like next year.
Who you bringing next year? Did they give you suggestions for which food truck to bring? Waco Tacos. Nice. That's great. Yeah, there were some really neat ideas when we first did the art of neighboring. Some really good ideas. We heard from some churches that first year that were putting it into practice right away, inviting their church to think about what it means to love their neighbors and doing the cards and then talking about those simple ways in the book, The Art of Neighboring, which is listed on the book resources in the back of your program today. He talks about those little things that you do, the block parties, the cookout in the backyard, and you invite all your neighbors to it, or your front yard, because backyards can sometimes be a little more intimidating. But bringing it right out on the street, bringing it into the cul-de-sac, if you live in a neighborhood like that, different ways that you can engage and invite people. And so there was a church that was actually saying, hey, if you plan a neighborhood activity, kind of like what you were saying, a grant available, we will help pay for. We'll provide the food, you provide the cornhole. And invite your neighbors. And really kind of empowering their congregation and saying, we're going to even help you do it. We'll buy the popsicles for you to, in the middle of a summer night, have a game night in your yard and then give popsicles to all the kids. Check with their parents first. But different creative ways to just empower, really practical. It's like, oh, is that ministry? Is that what a church should be all about? Like, absolutely. How do we empower our congregation? So hopefully you've heard some encouraging things around your table. I want to invite one of our friends up, Josh, to come up and share a little bit about one of the ways his church has gotten creative about loving some of their neighbors. And this is a pretty big, so this bridge is probably between relational and programmatic, maybe, I don't know, a little bit of both. So Josh, could you introduce yourself and share just a little bit about what you guys are doing?
Name is Joshua Nolt. I pastor Lancaster Brethren in Christ Church on Fruitville Pike. We have the ugliest sign on Fruitville Pike. It is a miracle it still stands. I was actually hoping I was going to be up after cookies because I was like, what better time to present than as people were going to eat warm cookies.
You're keeping them from their cookies, so... But it's worth it. It's going to be worth it.
I hope so. So they gave me a few minutes and tasked me with telling a 2.5-year-old story and giving you practical advice in 5 minutes. And so that's not going to happen. So what I want to do is give you some highlights and begin by something that I picked up just as we're talking together today, I think as pastors and church leaders. Oftentimes we think that we have to do everything. And I would just want to encourage us, one of the things that I've learned is that we can't do everything, and that's okay. That's something that we have to accept. It's part of being human. It's part of limitations. But then the question is, so what can we do? And if we're doing something, that is a good thing. We can't do everything. I'd also like to just give you 2 ideas before I tell the story. One of our friends talked about, at our table, talked about the idea of scale. And so our friends from CAP and the factory, they have scale that probably a lot of us as local churches don't have. And so some of us are going to be doing much smaller things, and smaller things are fine to do. I think there's some impression sometimes among churches that we have to change the world, and it's going to be in one big false swoop. But if you've been in ministry for any sort of amount of time, you find that great things are hard to pull off, and it's actually a lot of the small things that make the most difference in your church and in your neighborhood. And so the second idea, and maybe counter to our friend who talked about strategy, I've stumbled into about everything good that our church has done. It's not been strategic planning. It's not been by hiring a consultant, but it's simply been by being open to what God brings our way, which is something another person at our table talked about. And so here's the story that started a couple years ago. It didn't impact thousands of people, didn't impact hundreds of people. It impacted 14 people. And it's a segment of the population that we haven't talked about directly today, but it's the segment of the population of migrants and refugees that find their place in Lancaster County. Our first entry into refugee resettlement ministry happened in 2021 as a response to the refugee crisis that was happening in Afghanistan. And so we thought we were going to be a welcome team that was going to help an Afghani family come and move into Lancaster. We ended up with a family from Central America. That is not the story. The story begins then 2 years after that when I received a phone call from the person who owned one of 2 neighboring properties to our church. And his name was Antonio, and he wondered if we wanted to buy the house because he had bought it to flip it. It was one of the blighted houses in our neighborhood, and he got in over his head and wanted to know if we wanted to buy it. And we didn't want to just buy a piece of property to have property. And so as our leadership team talked, we wanted a purpose, a mission-oriented purpose to use this property for. And so we went back to this experience in 2021 and thought about refugee resettlement ministry. So our leadership team thought it was a good idea, and then shortly thereafter, there was a ministerial meeting that I was hosting in Manheim Township at our church. It rotated, and sometimes we have people from different organizations come and share about what they do. That day happened to be Church World Service. I didn't organize this, didn't know they were coming, but we got to talking like, oh, you do this, and this is what we're thinking. And then as we're walking across the parking lot, Andrew was his name, and he says to me, there's this new organization that just developed. It's called Open Hands, the Open Hands Initiative, with Mennonite Central Committee, Mennonite Disaster Service, Church World Service. And he said, if you're lucky, maybe MDS will do all this work for you. And so I thought, okay. So long story short, we were the first project for the Open Hands Initiative. MDS took the lead on a lot of the reconstruction of the house, which took about 8 months to do. And currently there's a family of 9 that's living in there. When CWS came onto the property, we also said, hey, we have this other property because it had been used for 10 years with Love Inc. and Homes of Hope, which had recently shut down. And they said, we have this other family from a Central American country that needs a home as well. And so now we have 2 homes that we are using for refugee resettlement. So random phone call, chance meeting, and this was an opportunity for our congregation. And this was a wonderful thing for our congregation to be a part of. So we brought it to them in a series of town hall meetings. They voted 96% in favor to do this together. They followed this. We're not a large congregation. We're medium-sized, perhaps. Followed that up, and in 6 weeks, they raised $150,000 for a down payment. We actually just paid it off in about 20 months. MBS helped us alongside of it, and then we had those 2 families moved in. I want to wrap this up with some practical things because there's a lot more to the story to tell, but I do want to emphasize this. None of it was neat and tidy. And in fact, it was almost kind of, you remember the Indiana Jones movie where there's that like invisible bridge, right? And you're like, is it gonna? That was the kind of experience that we had in pulling this together. And so it was just taking one step after another after another. I had friends that came back as missionaries in London, England, who came back into the county the same time this was happening. They're leading our refugee ministry. And so just a lot of different things fell into place, but none of it's been neat and tidy. It's full of a lot of sacrifice of time. There's a lot of cultural perceptions that you navigate. You navigate that with neighbors. But then there's also the added benefit of neighbors coming alongside you and helping you make these families feel at home. We have this really super beat up basketball hoop. You would think we'd replace it. Like we bought a house, but we can't replace a backboard that's half falling apart, right? But all the neighborhood kids are playing there from Central America, the Middle East, Manheim Township. They're all in our driveway on this poor little basketball hoop. But we resettled them. We helped them find jobs. Then we helped them find other jobs. Then we've helped them find other jobs. Some of these things are seasonal, and all these things that we've been talking about in terms of poverty, these things have happened for these families all at once in the midst of the trauma of leaving wherever they've come from, whether it be war zones, areas of violence or poverty in their own lands, having zero language, which is an incredible inhibitor to a job. All these things that they're facing. Countless medical appointments. Traumatic physical things happening just in their bodies because they now have a place of peace and space to kind of catch up mentally and physically for things that they have experienced over years and decades, but now they finally have a place and they have people around them to be able to care for them. And that's what our church has been able to do, and it's been beautiful. When you read, last thing here, Jack, and I'll let you have it, and the cookies, because I saw you get up there. But when we read headlines, and I think a lot of us are disturbed at things happening in the world, you wonder what you can do, and you think about how you're going to change the world or those kinds of things. It's not always the big things. And so the other week we had our friend from Central America sitting at our piano with our worship team on a Sunday morning, singing in his native language, leading us in his native language. And you think about how our country is treating migrants and refugees, and you're like, what can I do? And is that changing the world? No, but yes. Yes. Because most times sacred things are small things. They're not big things. And they come to us from unexpected places. Thanks.
Amen. Thank you, Josh. Oh my gosh. Thank you so much. It was awesome. So if you're looking for neat and tidy, don't try to love your neighbors, because it will not be. What a great example of just being responsive to what God is doing in the moment. Thank you for sharing that, Josh. We are going to take that break. The cookies are still warm and soft, I promise, or they're at least soft. We're going to take a little break here, and we're going to come back. We do have one more session. Please stick around. We'll be out of here before 4. That was our promise to you, but we're going to have a great last session and a chance for some final Q&A with all of our panelists, if there's anything that's kind of rolling around in your head that you want to do. So let's take that break, and I'll call you back in a little bit.